Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be back. I come to as many meetings as I can, but I was just thinking earlier today, when's the last time I actually spoke in front of the group? And it actually was spring of 2012, right before my primary, was the last time we actually had a candidate forum that my opponent didn't show up at. So I got the floor to myself, and that's the last time I've spoken to the entire group. So a lot's happened since that time. I've gotten married. I was elected state representative, sworn in, spent my first session, had 3 consecutive special sessions, which was a record. We went straight from May, June, July, into August of last year. And here we are again, almost a year later. Now we're ready for our November election. So thankfully I didn't have a primary opponent this time. I do have an opponent this November. It's a libertarian, so if you do live in District 97, here we go, I sure would appreciate your vote. Here is the district. It's southwest Tarrant County. It encompasses all of Benbrook, parts of Aledo on the Tarrant County side, parts of Crowley, and then this chunk pretty much from I-30 south to the Tarrant-Johnson border, and technically 8th Avenue west to the Tarrant-Parker border. And that's District 97. As you can see, a lot of potential. It's one of the main districts in Tarrant County where pretty much we're going to grow. And whether you're for or against the Chisholm Parkway, we can have that argument all day, I'm sure. But the fact of the matter is that it's there. And what it's going to do is bring incredible growth to this part of Tarrant County, the southwest corner of Tarrant County. I know a lot of things already in the works that are getting ready to come there, so stay tuned. If you like growth and if you like new things, it's coming, whether we like it or not, so be prepared. I wanted to kind of go through where we are legislatively moving forward, if you can. And I don't want to take up, I told Georgia said, how long are you going to speak? And I said, oh, probably 10 or 15 minutes. She said, you have to speak longer. What I prefer to do is kind of have an interactive discussion. So if anytime you have any questions along the way, or want to stop me and ask me, or want to get involved in the discussion of why does that happen that way, I'll try and answer any and all questions you have. I did want to introduce Lee Collins. Lee's my district director. She's here. And she works in the office every day, which is at Bryan Urban and I-20. And then during session, she's going to come down to Austin next year and be our legislative director. So she's going to be the one reading the 6,000 bills that are introduced every single during session. So moving forward, key dates. Of course, Election Day is a key date, so we all have that on our mind. But after that, November 10th is a key date, and that's the first date we can file bills. So here it goes. November 10th, at least one of 6,000 bills will be filed. And a lot of these bills will be, a lot of the bills filed in November are going to be a lot of bills that weren't passed last session. Whether by current authors from this past session or new authors this session, but that tends to be what happens is a lot of people pick up on legislation they were working last session that didn't pass. We start late this year. We start January 13th. We start constitutionally the second Tuesday of the month, and it's really late this time. So then Governor Abbott will be sworn in soon after that. Yeah. What I didn't know when I first got down there is that the first 60 days, really nothing happens. And why is that? Well, it's in our state constitution. Constitutionally, we cannot pass a law for the first 60 days. When they wrote the original Constitution, when I asked about this, it gave people time to get their homes and ranches out far in West Texas in order to get on the horseback and give them time to make it to Austin. So basically the bell rang and they had 60 days to get their affairs in order and then make it to Austin to start voting on bills, which is quite interesting. I didn't know that. So we do a lot of stuff in January, February, but it's a lot of honoring people, a lot of welcoming people. So I encourage you, I say this in every single speech and I'll say it again, I encourage you to come down next year and come visit our office and come see how the process works. Because it's an amazing thing to learn. I certainly learned a ton my freshman year. I'm still learning a ton going into my sophomore year. And there's no way to know everything that goes on just by being down there one session. So there's still a lot to learn. I'm learning every day. But please feel free to come down, contact Lee, contact me, and come down and visit us during session. We'll walk you through. We'll get you to sit in the gallery and watch, and depending on what's going on, watch what's going on. So last day of filing bills is going to be March 13th. That is a wave of activity. Everybody, I mean, it really is weird. So I'm for less government, right? Conservative Republican. Of my freshman class, there were 41 of us. I filed the least amount of bills. Now, that truly was by design in that I'm for less government, right? So why would I file a whole bunch of bills? One of my Democrat colleagues filed 51 bills, 51 pieces of legislation. I don't think he got one, maybe he got one passed. Because all freshmen get at least one bill passed, or at least the opportunity to get it passed. So, you know, I'm not a big bill filer as far as, oh, you got to get something done. But believe it or not, a lot of people are, especially on the Democrat side. So there's a wave of activity on that March 13th to get your bill in if it hadn't gotten in. And then constitutionally, by June 1st, we'll be finished. So what in reality happens is we pass a 2-year budget. We're there from January until the end of May. And in reality, because we constitutionally can't pass anything the first 2 months, your government, your state government gets all their business done technically in 2 months, April and May, March, April, May. You could say 2.5 months. So we passed a $191 billion budget to last for 2 years, 2 months. So let's go through that process a little bit. Coming up, this is our current state budget. This is everything. These are dedicated funds, non-dedicated, general revenue, federal funds that come into the mix, and all other funds. This is what runs your state right here. Now, if we kind of break it down a little bit, here's all funds by appropriation, where they all go. Look at the 2 biggest pieces of the pie, health and human services and education. Cover over 70% of your budget. So when you ask how come there's not money for anything else, this is why. And this is all money coming in. When it really comes down to it, what we have control over, right here, general revenue. This is what we as state legislatures have control of, where the money goes in the pie. Now, looking in the next session, health and human services, going to go up. Education, more than likely going to go up. Why? Because, good, my first interactive question. Thank you. Well, it's going to go up because it always does, number one. But number two, there's going to be a less of fight of how much it goes up because of the court case. There's a court case going on school financing right now, going way back to the Robin Hood in the 1970s. And Judge Dietz down in San Antonio, judge just ruled that the school financing in our state is unconstitutional. So General Abbott is already appealing that, and so it'll probably go to the Supreme Court. But it probably won't get there by the time we start session. So I don't know, I truly don't know how they're going to work that, if they go and appropriate funds or the current funds or throw a little more of it into the pot. But until they solve the school financing, and again, they've been battling the school financing in the state since the 1970s of how to distribute the wealth, we're just going to continue to battle over this. But it is, wait till my next chart, and then you'll really shake your head. But this is truly, I mean, you can see in the blue and very lightly in the brown and the purple how much money we have to play around with if you take out health and human services and education. So here's kind of interesting as well. The comptroller, either at the end of December or in January, will basically tell us how much money we have to spend. projections are already out there saying that we will have $8 to $10 billion more to spend this next year for the biennium. So that's kind of interesting, and what to do with all that money, and where in this pie we can put it. Or do we spend all that money and do what I want to do, which is, if we have a surplus, let's return it to the taxpayers, because we're doing pretty good right now.
On the Health and Human Services, will Obamacare have any?
No, Obamacare doesn't have anything to do with that, because we voted as members last session to say thanks but no thanks to the federal government on Medicaid expansion. So, this is all pretty much Medicaid. Yes, ma'am.
And one more question about the education is you go out Common Core.
Yes, Common Core, yeah, that actually was led by Senator Patrick, who will be your next Lieutenant Governor. He was chairman of the Education Committee in the Senate, and he was strongly behind getting rid of that. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's another thing Senator Patrick's already spoken about, that as Lieutenant Governor, he wants to return money to taxpayers, so he's going to be a big champion of that in the Senate. So I expect that to happen in the Senate and come over to the House, as far as giving tax relief and tax reform. Yes, ma'am. Will the influx of illegal aliens affect the education spending? Yes. Yes, it will. More people create more. I mean, how the funding does right now is seats per student. So how many students come to your school, do you get X amount of dollars for every seat that's filled in the school? So any school that can cruise, well, there's 500 students that come sit in our schools every day, they get a chunk of the money. Was there another hand up back here? No? Oh, yes, sir.
When will somebody have enough guts where you go back and forth with my representative going on and admit about human resources and in-school curriculum policy?
I think you may see it. I don't know. He asked if will we bring back a bill that says in-state tuition for the illegal immigrants. It's a good question. I haven't heard anyone speak about it yet. What do you think? Okay, run this one around. Okay, cool. Use it. Perfect. All right. Does this work? Yeah, it should be working. Okay, there we go. It's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's worth talking about. The problem is, and we'll have to see where General Abbott is on it, because obviously we know where Governor Perry was on it, and we'll see if General Abbott will sign that if it passes. I mean, the reason why it wasn't brought up last session is Governor Perry's for it. Well, you're not going to pass any piece of legislation Governor Perry is anti, because he'll just veto it.
You can override it if you got to bring it to the floor first.
Right. Well, that's a very good point. Very good point. Yes, ma'am. There we go.
Influx of illegal aliens. They each have to have a translator. They have to have remedial training to be brought up to speed. Both of those require 2 more pieces of money. Is that in your mind?
Well, let me, y'all are jumping ahead of where my charts are. So let's be interactive with where I am. And then we'll get to all that. Okay. So anyway, the comptroller is going to say that we have a lot more money, $8 to $10 billion more, and we get to decide what we do with that. Like I said, I'm gonna lock in step with then Lieutenant Governor Patrick and say we need to return some to the taxpayers, because it's their money that keeps coming to us, and there's no reason for us to spend more. We need to return to the taxpayers. So here's another interesting tidbit, is there were actually talk last session, because we had so much more money, to even spend more, which a lot of us stood up and said we weren't going to do, to bust the spending cap. And that's where the idea mainly was we had to do something big with water. And that's where you voted on last November to take $2 billion out of the rainy day fund and put it in a separate bank to fund water projects. it was all during that discussion, was they knew they needed $2 billion for this water bank. And a lot of us said, well, let's take it out of general revenue. But there was so much money already being spent out of general revenue that we were going to bust the spending cap had we done that. And there were a number of us that said, we are not going to spend more than the comptroller says that we have. That's just bad business. So that's how that all developed and how the $2 billion then was taken out of the rainy day fund. So moving on, the issues. So we're going to have, in my mind, 3 major issues this next session to deal with. First one, transportation. We've got to find a long-term way to fund transportation projects across the state. Right now, we're doing it by what? We're doing it by toll roads. 2 things I'm absolutely against. The state of Texas should never build another toll road. And we should never pay for another road by incurring debt on our citizens. So, remember the first chart of how much money you had to spend? So I think you're going to see this session, there's going to be major talk of GR, general revenue, actually spending money from general revenue on transportation projects. I know Senator Hancock next door to us is a big proponent of that. So I'm certainly going to be working with him closely to see that that happens. You're going to get an opportunity this November, it's Proposition 1 on the ballot, to put more money into transportation without touching your pocketbook, in a sense, in that the money that flows in the rainy day fund mainly comes from oil and gas revenues. And what we passed, it took 3 special sessions to pass, and we finally did, and frankly, it was our class that helped get this done. In the 3rd special session, Giovanni Cadriglione, the Northeast rep, and Ron Simmons, who are 2 brilliant guys and finance gurus, they basically came up with a plan that we could all vote for. Because we knew at the time that for sure they were going to take this money, or take it, instead of flowing to the rainy day fund, they were going to take money, that was the bottom line plan, to take money somehow from the rainy day fund. And so what we finally decided was, we have to put a cap. There has to be a limit of how much money can be taken out of the rainy day fund. And basically what was decided, and what you're going to get a chance to vote on this November, Proposition 1 is, so with this money that flows into the rainy day fund, instead of all of it going to the rainy day fund, to continue building that up, and estimates are that it's going to be at 11 to possibly even up to 14 billion within 2 years. Because so much money is going in there, since the oil and gas industry is doing so well. Is to take half that money that goes in the rainy day fund and put it into transportation, and for it only to be used to build transportation projects, not for tolls, not for byways, not to buy property, but for construction projects only. So if you vote on that in November, that's where that money's going to go. Yes, sir.
No hike and bike and...
No hike and bike trails. No, it can't be spent on that. Can't be spent on that. For construction, for I-35 to be built and widened. That's what it can be built on. Yes, sir.
Are you going to put bike trails on it?
No bike trails. It's not for bike trails. It's for highways.
Well, we got 5 miles of sidewalk out there that we go in open range. Nobody will ever.
No. I live on Forest Park. We just put a bike lane in there. We shrunk the street. In a growing city, we shrunk a street and put a bike lane. So,
which nobody uses.
Which someone pointed out, no, right around the corner. Yeah, Mike. Where's the microphone, Pete?
About ending the gas tax diversions.
Yeah, that's for sure. I say for sure. I mean, gas tax. Here's what part of the revenue is where it all comes from. But I think you will definitely see gas tax diversions ending. I think I'm picking up a bill. Linda Harper Brown actually had a great bill last session that I'm going to file on November, but I think a lot of people are. And that is right now when you buy a new car, the sales tax from that goes to the general revenue to go to anywhere, to any fund that they want. This piece of legislation says it goes straight to transportation fund, to fund more projects. So it is thinking creatively and actually using taxes that are for roads and highways appropriately. Let me get a show of hands, because this is kind of an interesting discussion. Another one of my fellow members said they did a poll, and it actually came out very favorable. They haven't raised the gas tax in the state of Texas since the 1970s. If the gas tax was raised, and it went strictly to build more roads and highways, not for tolls or anything else, how many people would be for a little raise in the gas tax?
Raising what manner?
Raised by,
Inflation?
no, raised by a nickel, 10 cents. No, okay. That's interesting. 2, 3?
I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Okay. I'm against it too, but that's, you have a question?
I learned my lesson on that.
Yes.
That is there going to be a prioritization within the transportation bill of what the money is spent on and where it gets spent?
That's a great question. We talked about that earlier. So,
I got the answer.
all right, go ahead.
Texas Council of Government has their thumb on it.
Yeah.
So you guys pass a law that Centrair, as an alien being, cannot do business in the state of Texas. And they quit buying everybody off, it's going to remain the same.
Well-
They just keep changing the name of the transportation department. It's alive and well as it ever.
Yeah. Like I said, if I have anything to do with it, and as a freshman you probably don't, but as a sophomore you really start doing it. If I have anything to do with it, we won't build another toll road in the state of Texas. And Centrair won't have it. But as far as projects that are on the books or need to be on the books, that is something I think that you're going to see differently this next session as well. It's kind of telling TxDOT, you have to prioritize, you have to tell us where in the state are the most needed, where you need the funds, because right now it's not. Believe it or not, TxDOT gets together and they just really kind of, as projects come in, they appropriate their money as they seem fit, which was really shocking to learn. So I'm hopefully going to be a lot more involved in making sure that they prioritize. I mean, obviously I-35 needs to be wider. For anybody who's driven from I-30 to I-35 in the mornings, it's a mess. And whoever engineered that, I hope they don't have a job anymore. Because I don't understand how 3 lanes come into 1 lane and then that lane merges into another lane before you're able to do anything, because that's just going to create gridlock. So anyway, here we are on transportation. Obviously, more money needs to be put in, and it needs to be watched, and it needs to be prioritized. So let's go back to your education question. My very first day on the job, I told my chief of staff, I will be all for putting as much money, because pretty much it's the Democrats who say more money, more money, more money in education. So that is their mantra. So I said, I will be all for putting as much money in education if you can prove to me that the money matters. And here's the chart that we got back. From 1972 to 2012, the rise in millions and billions being spent in education. And look at test scores. Flat. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. You have to be more accountable with how your money's being spent. You have to prove that money in the classroom is where it needs to go. I've said from day one, I'm all for giving teachers a pay raise. They're the ones who are actually in the classrooms teaching our children every single day. And there's not one person in these big administration buildings teaching our children, yet there are 2 administrators, probably now going on 3 administrators for every 1 teacher. So go back to that chart of where the money's being spent in education. A lot of it in these administration buildings, and these administrators sitting there thinking of ways to tell our teachers to teach our children. When I was knocking on doors, and I knocked on over 5,000 doors, I knocked on a lot of teachers' doors. And they said 2 things. 1, stop at the tests. We are teaching to the tests, and we have to stop that. So we did it in HB 5, the education bill that we passed. We did a great job of getting rid of the majority of the tests. Number 2, they said, let us teach. We're teachers, we know what we're doing, we know what the children need to learn. We get these notes from these administrators saying you need to do this, you need to follow this, the Common Core. Just let teachers teach. Every single one of us in the room has been affected by a teacher in our lives, someone who really showed us and taught us. And that's what we need more of. We need more great people in the classroom and not in these big old buildings telling them how to teach. Mike? Some tell me your hand's going to go up a lot tonight.
Unless you get me started up on immigration.
Oh, that's the next slide.
I've been to two meetings with superintendents, one down in Granbury and one in Toledo recently, where I learned from Howard Texans and Ross Cussick about the fact, and you alluded to it briefly there, about the fact that I think over the last 30 years roughly that the growth in staff, non-teaching staff at schools has grown 7 times faster than student growth. And so I brought that question up to both administrators, and both superintendents had the same exact question. It's because of the number of regulations that is being passed in Austin. And the last one I spoke with Toledo promised me he would send me a list of the 200 bills that have been passed since the year 2000. He hasn't sent it to me yet, so I don't know whether he's telling me the truth or not. Do you know anything about that? Because they claim that if we could eliminate many of these regulations coming out of Austin, repeal them, which I'd like to see y'all do a lot more of, instead of passing new stuff, start repealing some of the other regulatory stuff. Do you know, is that true? I mean, are there like I know you don't know the number, but have you learned, are there a bunch of bills that have been passed in the last 15 years that are causing these schools to hire all these extra people? I mean, is that true, or is that just the TEA trying to get their hands in more and more money?
I said at the beginning, if I didn't know the answer to the question, I would admit I don't know the answer to that question, but that is true. I'm all for getting rid of it. And this is where I think leadership from Senator Patrick, hopefully soon to be Lieutenant Governor Patrick, is going to be critical. Because Senator Patrick was chairman of the Education Committee on the Senate last year. And a lot of the changes we saw to better education came from his committee and came out of the Senate that ended up coming over to the House. With him as our Lieutenant Governor, you're going to see a lot of that. I mean, if that's true, let's bring that to attention and let's get all that taken out. Because that regulation, that's what's hindering what's going on in our classrooms. Shame on us as a state. We need to stop it. Okay. Here it is, the third major issue, border security. Keep in mind, this does not include this year. Y'all been reading the papers, how much of a problem it is, and all the children at the border, and how Governor Perry has sent the National Guard down, and he's found more money to send our own DPS troopers down there. I think this is going to be the third major issue of this session, is finding more money to send more people down to the border to protect our borders. I've said this before, if 9/11 happened and we could have proved that those gentlemen came across the Texas-Mexico border, what do you think would have happened? That's exactly right. We would have moved mountain and earth to close our borders and seal them shut. So that's what scares me. And if you talk to the men and women down there who are trying to protect our borders, these are not majority Mexican citizens coming across the border. In fact, they say only 20% are. 80% are of descendants from different countries, from all over the world. So this is what scares me. And this is what we have to move mountain and earth ourselves, since the federal government's not doing it. It is their job. It is the federal border. It's a federal government's job to protect and defend our borders, but they're not doing it. Thankfully, we live in the great state of Texas, and we have the resources. If the federal government's not going to do it, we have to do it ourselves. And that's what you're going to see, in my mind, a lot more money dedicated to send more people down there to protect our borders. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is our DPS officers who are down there now, and our National Guard who are down there now, are deterrents. They don't have arresting authority. They don't have any authority to really prevent people from crossing, other than standing there, because it's a federal border.
Can we give that authority?
We cannot. The federal government has to. Yes, we cannot, because they're state. So that's, you know, that's the problem. But question? Yes.
Back here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Why are we holding the federal government accountable for defending our state border?
We're
Why are we
trying.
suing
I
them?
mean, every single one, well, I think you're going to see a lot more of that as well. But, I mean, you talk to every single congresswoman, you talk to Senator Cruz, you talk to Senator Cornyn. I mean, the best they can do is go to Obama and go to his administration and say, we need help. I mean, Governor Perry has done it a number of times when Obama's come to the state to raise money. He's tried to be there with a letter saying, here's what we spent protecting our border, we want reimbursement. Or here's a letter, we need more help at our border. And it goes on deaf ears. So until we get a change in the White House, we have to take care of ourselves. And that's what you're going to see a major debate this next session on doing. Yes, sir.
Not exactly, if I may.
Go ahead.
I actually disagree.
Okay.
Presentation I gave here at the meeting, what was it, about a month ago, I guess it was, so on border security issue. This is an invasion. It's not an immigration issue. Article 1, Section 10 states that no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty, so on and so forth, or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. We are being invaded. If the federal government does not do their duty, according to Article 4, Section 4, Clause 4, then Governor Perry has every constitutional authority available to him to say we are in imminent danger from these influx of invaders, and if they don't do it, we can do it. And according to Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 15 and 16, it says here that in case of something like an invasion, that the Congress can provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws and unions, suppress insurrections, and repeal invasions. If they don't do it, the governor can call it not just the state guard, but also the Texas militias. We got 3 pretty good-sized militias that are organized like our founder said, and he can call them up, and we can fund the money to them to pay them to be an offer job to take care of this. Do it ourselves.
Do it. No. Difference between could and will.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You could get 912 members, Tea Party members, volunteers, old guys like me and Jack. I go down in an AK-47, you think it's AR-15. We'd secure that damn border, I promise you.
There are people organizing to do that. I don't know if you do that. Yes, ma'am. I'll come back.
Come in.
Oh.
But I want to know what's going on.
Okay, Eric Holder seems so hot to sue
Yes.
Arizona.
Yes.
Why can't the southern border senators or representatives or whatever in Washington sue him right back?
Well, first of all, thankfully Eric Holder is leaving office, so let's start there. But it's worse than that. It's an Obama administration philosophy. And until we change who's in the White House, I mean, I hate to say it, we're stuck. We really are. And it starts this November by changing who's in the Senate. And if you can go to Louisiana and help the Republican win over there and get Mary Landrieu out of there, there's a start. But we have to take the U.S. Senate back. That's the start. And then we have to take the White House back. Because, I mean, it's absolutely insane how our federal government and our White House just are turning their backs. And it's intentional. Don't think it's not intentional. It's intentional.
It's un-American.
So, right. It's un-American.
We have one question here that went back.
Okay, you got it.
I don't know if you're a CHL.
When?
Read the law. It says, force up to and including dead
Absolutely.
maybe you fault criminal trespass. Those guys down there can shoot the main Mexicans on their property. And nobody can do a damn thing about it. And I think it's right.
Especially in the battle.
I understand.
Am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
What is being invaded in Fort Worth, Texas? It is the high school and the middle school. At Arlington Heights High School, you do not go into the east door, that is the drug door. At Rosemont Park, there is Rosemont Elementary and Rosemont Middle. The National Night Out Against Crime, I've stirred up the police department because I don't want 12 drug cartel terror to come to Rosemont Park Elementary School Middle School. It's a $200 billion business, which you already know. And I was so moved by hearing Gary Rusty Fleming saw his documentary, Drug Wars, and the other two, been on news, that I am stirring up the Police Department, City Fort Worth, South Division, Central Gang Unit, and a couple of other guys, because I'm very concerned what is being invaded. It's our school system. It is a business, $200 billion business. It has terror in it. I want you to have that in your mind.
I do, and look at this chart. I mean, this chart proves it's a business, and the cartel, that is the main report we get back from the border from our DPS officials, is the cartel is right across. The cartel will send people across one border, see that all the DPS officers go to, do whatever they can there, or bring in Border Patrol to apprehend them, and then they'll just send them across another border. I mean, so that, if you see across this chart, it's only gone up on all of our borders, on all of our border crossings. And until we do something about it as a state, because the federal government refuses to do so, this is going to continue to go up. And the worst are the children being sent up here. And they're primarily from Central America. And they are, their lives are so bad in Central America, but apparently there was news all in Central America, send your kids up, they get a free ride once they get in there. And bring sickness into the, absolutely. So we have to, as a state, act. And that's what I'm saying. You're going to see a major.
I wanted to ask, are you close to? Oh, I was going to ask if you're about doing your presentation. We let you finish, then we get the questions. So
there we go.
Wayne, do we have time for a few more?
Yeah, do a couple, but Aaron does want to, we've got
Right.
to come
Okay.
up to.
We got 2 questions.
And I'll wrap it real quick. Let me wrap it real quick. So bottom line, as you can see, the debate in here that we've started is these, in my mind, are going to be the 3 major issues that we discussed in the 84th session. It's transportation funding, how do we fund it without tolls, without going into debt? Education funding, do we continue to throw more money at a problem that continues to exist when our kids are not being educated well? And then border security. What do we as a state do about it since the federal government refuses to act?
Right, so Craig, I promised no more questions unless you got me stirred up on integration.
Sorry.
You managed to do that.
No, this is good for me. This is good for me to learn as well.
So I'd like to float 2 ideas that I've heard circulated and get the reaction from the audience, an honest reaction to whether you think this is a good idea or a bad idea, because they're both kind of controversial. And also get the opinion after the reaction from both you and our constitutional expert back here about whether you think it's constitutional. Number 1, first idea is that it's actually one of the incoming freshmen, one of the ones that just won the primary. I think it was him and a couple of the freshmen, you guys, that came up with this, including a guy from East Texas, had the idea that the governor, if he was willing to do this, especially, and I heard this idea before the Ebola outbreak, could actually use state resources like the DPS and the National Guard, who currently can't arrest, although they do because the governor called them out. I understand if he gave them arresting authority, they do have arresting authority. If Obama called out the Guard, they would not. But because Harry did, they do have arresting authority. And that's what, anyway. So with that arresting authority, what about the idea that because of the concern of the diseases, because we do know our diseases are coming across the border, especially now, we don't have any evidence of Ebola coming across the border, but because that potentially could be a threat. What about the idea of the state arresting these people and putting them in quarantine and not handing them over to the federal government like they're doing right now? Can I just show of hands who would support that idea?
Everybody's got his hand.
And so now let's go to the second idea. Personally, I'm tired of paying for all the free stuff that the people that are not even supposed to be here are getting, the health care, the education, and all that. So what about, and as you know, the big surge right now is from Central America. And I don't think you've seen the numbers. There's huge amounts of money, billions of dollars going back to these in remittances. We call them remittances. Would you, and as conservatives, we don't normally like the idea of taxing. Does the audience, would they support an idea to tax those remittances? Let's say a 10% tax on all the remittances going back to these countries, especially the 3 and maybe even including Mexico, And the money that you bring in from that tax, 1/3 would go to the school districts to help pay for the education of these incoming students that right now we're being forced to educate. 1/3 going to the hospital districts that are also absorbing the cost, and 1/3 to help fund future border security operations. How many would support that idea?
See, all they make the tax 50%.
Okay, so yeah, I hear one person. Anyway, so I'd like, there's potential constitutional concerns about those two, so I'd love to hear y'all's reaction.
Thanks, Mike. Great points. Was there one or two more?
There's one question over here.
Okay.
As far as the second thing, that might be considered a direct tax, and the Constitution does prohibit a direct tax. So I don't know, you have to kind of look at it and think about it a little bit more. So
I told Wayne, New York City's having a hell of a time trying to even collect parking tickets from foreign countries. I can imagine as a tax in the country and saying, you know what that does? Hoping that would pay.
Craig, you said earlier that, the problem is the White House. And we've got to take the Senate, we've got to take the House. What about the state legislatures, which right now, Article 5 allows to do, when are we going to be moving toward a state convention and begin making amendments that will change some of this that's going on?
I think you're going to see a push for that in this next session as well. We've already had several good Thank you. The wheels are in motion on that.
I hope not. I'll talk to you about that later.
Okay. Well, right. All right. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. And
Listen, I